History lives in the things we leave behind. Old letters, worn tools, faded photographs. These objects hold secrets. They carry stories that time tried to erase. Sometimes those stories are stranger than anyone could imagine. In a quiet corner of rural America, an old farmhouse stood silent for decades. The paint had peeled. The windows were dusty. The rooms were filled with forgotten belongings. When Blakely Kaiden inherited the property, she had no idea what waited inside. Blakely climbed the narrow stairs to the attic one afternoon in early spring. Dust danced in the sunlight that slipped through the cracks. Old furniture sat covered in sheets. Boxes were stacked against the walls. Most held nothing special. Old clothes, broken dishes, pieces of a life long gone. Then Blakely found something different. A wooden box sat wedged behind a broken chair. The wood was dark with age. Heavy brass hinges held the lid shut. She pulled it free and carried it to the window where the light was better. Inside the box were glass plates. They were photographic negatives from another time. Each one was wrapped carefully in cloth. Blakely had seen pictures like this in museums. They were from the early 1900s, back when photography was new and difficult, back when a single picture took hours to prepare. She chose one plate at random. It looked like any other. She took it to a local photography shop. The owner knew how to develop old negatives. He worked carefully. When the image appeared, it showed a family. They stood on a farmhouse porch. Their faces were stern. Their clothes were formal and dark. The date scratched into the corner of the plate read 1905. The photograph looked normal at first, a typical family portrait from over a century ago. But something was wrong. Blakely felt it before she could name it. The shop owner noticed it too. He leaned closer to the print. His eyes narrowed. There was a window behind the family. In that window was a reflection. The glass had captured something. Something that should not be there. Something impossible. The reflection was distorted. The old glass warped the image. But even through the distortion, shapes were visible. Figures stood in the background. They were watching. They were part of the scene, yet somehow separate from it. How could this be? How could a simple family photograph from 1905 contain an image that made no sense? What did the reflection truly show? And why did it feel so wrong? These questions had no easy answers. But Blakely knew she had to find out. The mystery pulled at her. This was not just an old picture. This was a puzzle that reached across time. Blakely needed help. She took the photograph to someone who understood history. Freya worked at the County Historical Society. She had spent years studying the region and its past. She knew about old photographs. She knew about the families who had lived on these farms. Freya examined the print carefully. She recognized the style, the formal pose, the stiff clothing. Everything matched the period. But when she looked at the reflection in the window, her expression changed. She had never seen anything like it. The reflection showed something that did not belong. Figures stood in a field behind the photographer. Their postures were strange, unnatural. They seemed to be watching the family, but they could not have been there. Not like that. Freya made calls. She knew people who specialized in old photographs. The glass plate negative needed professional examination. She sent it to Timothy, an expert who had studied early photography for 30 years. He worked in a lab 3 states away. He had the tools and knowledge to determine if the image was real or fake. Timothy received the negative with care. He placed it under special lights. He examined every corner through magnification equipment. He tested the materials. Glass plates from 1905 had specific characteristics. The emulsion was silver nitrate. The glass had particular thickness and quality. The camera lenses of that era left signatures in how they focused light. Days passed. Timothy ran test after test. He looked for signs of tampering. Double exposure was common in early photography. Sometimes plates were exposed twice by accident. Sometimes people did it on purpose to create ghost images. But double exposure left traces. chemical marks, alignment errors, something that gave it away. Timothy found nothing. The negative was authentic. The materials matched the 1905 date perfectly. There were no signs of manipulation, no evidence of trickery. The reflection was part of the original exposure. It had been captured at the same moment the family posed on their porch. This should have been impossible. But the evidence was clear. Whatever the reflection showed, it had been there when the photograph was taken. While Timothy worked on the technical analysis, Freya began researching the family. She needed to know who they were. She needed to understand their story. She called Knox, a historian who specialized in rural life in the early 1900s. She also contacted Tate, a genealogist who could trace family lines through old records. Together, they began to build a picture of the past. The family in the photograph was identified through land records. They had owned the farm for 3 generations. They were known in the community but kept to themselves. Deeply religious, intensely private. They rarely came to town except for supplies and church. Knox found newspaper archives from 1905. That year had been difficult for farmers in the region. Crops failed. Disease spread through livestock. Many families struggled. Some lost everything. The newspaper mentioned this particular family only once. A brief notice about illness. Nothing more. Tate traced the family tree. Birth records, death certificates, census data. She found that several family members had died in the years following 1905. The survivors moved away from the farm less than a year after this photograph was taken. They never returned. They sold the property to strangers and scattered to different states. Why had they left so quickly? What had happened on that farm? The records gave no answers, only dates and facts. But those facts painted a picture of a family in crisis, a family running from something. The reflection in the window remained unclear. The distortion made it hard to see details. Freya knew they needed better technology. She sent the high-resolution scan to Oakley, a forensic imaging specialist. Oakley worked with law enforcement and museums. She could enhance old photographs using digital tools that revealed hidden details. Oakley loaded the scan into her computer. She began the slow process of correction and enhancement. She adjusted contrast levels. She reduced distortion caused by the old glass. She isolated the reflection and worked on it section by section. The process took days. Each adjustment revealed a little more. While Oakley worked, something else happened. Blakely returned to the farmhouse. She went back to the attic. If one photograph held secrets, perhaps there were others. She searched more carefully this time. She looked in places she had missed before. Under a loose floorboard, Blakely found a small leather book. It was old. The cover was cracked. The pages were yellowed and brittle. Inside was handwriting. A journal. The entries were dated. They started in 1903 and ended in late 1905. The journal belonged to the woman in the photograph, the matriarch of the family. Her handwriting was neat and controlled at first. She wrote about daily life, the weather, the crops, small complaints and small joys, normal things. But as the entries moved into 1905, the tone changed. The handwriting became rushed, less careful. She wrote about feeling watched, about seeing movement in the fields at night, shapes that should not be there, figures that cast no shadows in the moonlight. One entry stood out. It was written just days before the date on the photograph. She described an overwhelming sense of dread, a feeling that something was coming. She wrote that they needed to document the family, to have a record, just in case. The journal ended abruptly after that. No explanation, no final entry, just blank pages. Oakley finished her work. She called Freya with the results. The enhanced image was ready. Freya gathered the others, Blakely, Knox, Tate. Timothy joined by video call. They needed to see this together. Oakley displayed the enhanced reflection on a large screen. The distortion was gone. The details were clear. What they saw made the room go silent. The reflection showed figures standing in the field behind the photographer. There were 5 of them, maybe 6. They stood perfectly still. Their postures were wrong, too rigid, too straight. Their clothing did not match the era. It was darker, simpler, almost shapeless. They were watching the family. Their attention was fixed on the porch, on the people, posing for the camera. The figures were not hiding. They were just there, present, observing. The journal entries suddenly made terrible sense. The matriarch had not been imagining things. She had seen these figures. She had felt their presence. This photograph had captured what she tried to describe in words, evidence of something that should not exist. But what were they looking at? What did this mean? The group sat in silence for a long moment. Then the debate began. Timothy spoke first. As a scientist, he needed a rational explanation. He proposed a theory. The old glass in the window could have created an optical effect, light behaving in unusual ways. Perhaps workers had been in the field that day. Farm hands, neighbors. The odd postures could be explained by motion blur. The strange clothing could be a trick of shadow and contrast. He mentioned pareidolia. The human brain sees patterns even where none exist. Faces in clouds, shapes in static. Perhaps they were reading too much into random elements of the image. The journal entries could be explained by stress, by fear of crop failure and financial ruin. People see what they expect to see when they are afraid. It was a good theory, grounded in science and reason, but it felt incomplete. It did not explain why the figures appeared so deliberately placed, so focused. It did not explain the timing. Why this photograph? Why these specific warnings in the journal? Freya had contacted one more person, an expert in unexplained phenomena, someone who studied cases that defied normal explanation. This researcher examined the evidence with fresh eyes. The researcher pointed to similar cases in history, photographs that showed things that could not be explained, images captured on film that seemed to violate the rules of time and space. Some called them time slips, moments when past and present overlapped, when something from another time became briefly visible. Others believed certain places held impressions, like a recording burned into the fabric of a location. Strong emotions, traumatic events. These could leave marks that sensitive equipment might capture. Early cameras used long exposures. They gathered light over time. Perhaps they could capture things the human eye missed. The researcher did not claim to have answers, only possibilities. The evidence was real. The photograph was authentic. The journal documented experiences that matched the image, but the meaning remained open to interpretation. The group discussed both explanations, science versus the unexplained, logic versus mystery. No consensus emerged. Perhaps none was possible. Some mysteries exist in the space between what we know and what we cannot explain. What was clear was this. The photograph from 1905 was not a simple family portrait. It was a historical artifact that raised profound questions. It documented something unusual, something that multiple forms of evidence supported: the technical analysis, the journal entries, the family history of sudden departure. Knox researched what happened to the family after they left the farm. The survivors lived normal lives in other places. They worked, they married, they raised children, but none ever spoke publicly about their time on the farm. No letters mentioned it. No records explained their sudden move. It was as if they had agreed to forget, to leave that chapter closed. Whatever happened in 1905, they chose to move forward without looking back. The investigation began with a simple discovery: a box in an attic, a photograph in need of development. What emerged was far more complex, a mystery that spanned generations, a story that resisted simple explanations. From the dusty attic to the high-tech laboratory, every step revealed new layers. Each piece of evidence added to the puzzle, the authentic negative, the expert analysis, the family history, the journal entries, the enhanced reflection. All of it pointed to something extraordinary. History is not always what it seems. The past holds secrets in unexpected places. A window pane reflection, a hurried journal entry, a family that fled their home. These fragments tell a story that official records miss, a story that makes us question what we think we know about reality. The figures in the reflection remain unexplained. Their presence is documented but not understood. They stand as a reminder that some questions have no easy answers. Some mysteries persist despite our best efforts to solve them. The 1905 farm photograph is now preserved in climate-controlled storage. Researchers continue to study it. New theories emerge. New technology might reveal even more details. But the core mystery remains. What did the camera capture that day? What was watching the family, and why? Perhaps we will never know the full truth. Perhaps that is the nature of genuine mystery. It challenges us. It makes us think. It reminds us that the world is stranger and more complex than our daily lives suggest. What do you think the reflection shows? Do you believe in rational explanations? Or do you think some things exist beyond our current understanding? The evidence is presented. The theories are laid out. The conclusion is yours to draw. This investigation into historical mysteries continues. More forgotten photographs wait in attics and basements. More stories hide in the objects we leave behind. More secrets sleep in the places time forgot. Subscribe to follow the next investigation. Share your thoughts and theories. Help solve the puzzles that history left behind. The past is not dead. It is not even past. It lives in the reflections of old windows, in the pages of forgotten journals, in the faces of people who stared into cameras over a century ago. And sometimes, if we look carefully enough, it speaks to us across the years, telling us things we might not want to hear, showing us things we cannot fully explain. The 1905 farm photograph stands as proof. History holds mysteries we have yet to solve, and perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, standing as monuments to the unknown, reminding us that for all our knowledge and technology, the world still holds secrets, still holds wonder, still holds questions that make us pause and think and wonder. What appeared in that reflection shocked everyone who saw it. Now you have seen the evidence. You have heard the theories. You have followed the investigation from beginning to end. The question remains, what do you believe?